This whole thing started one day a few months ago when I opened my email and had a message from this Dave person, a total stranger from Austin, who told me that he'd been doing, had a few sessions of ketamine-assisted therapy. And he had what he thought was maybe a near-death experience during his third session, and he wanted to talk. So we Zoomed and had a nice conversation for about an hour, mostly him telling me the details of his experience. But then we decided to for him to take the near-death experience scale, which is an instrument that psychiatrist Bruce Greyson developed back in the early 1980s. That's the most widely used instrument to assess the presence and depth of a near-death experience. So it helps to understand this instrument a little bit. There are 16 items, and for each item, it describes a feature of a near-death experience, like seeing a brilliant light, let's say. And the respondent can say either 0, that wasn't in my experience, or 1, it was in my experience, but not a big deal, or 2, it was in my experience and it was intense. And so if you do the math, you can score anywhere from 0 to 32. And research has shown that a score of 7 or higher, if at least for research purposes, indicates the presence of a near-death experience. And the higher the number, the deeper the experience, the more features and the more intense the features. And I don't remember your score, Dave, exactly, but it was in the 20s.
Yeah.
As I recall, the low 20s.
Low 20s, mid 20s, something like that.
Low to mid 20s, yeah, which is high. That's high. So so we were kind of confirming that what he had was a near-death experience under ketamine. So I guess to start a little bit of background, and then I'm going to turn it over to Dave. Ketamine is a drug that was originally used as an anesthetic. So it was used. It's been widely used in with animals to put them under for surgery, and it's also been used in humans. Julie, our ketamine therapist, says that if you've had a colonoscopy, you've probably had ketamine, because that's apparently widely used for that purpose. So in ketamine-assisted therapy, the drug is used in a much lower dose, not enough to make the person unconscious, but it actually is it's psychoactive. It prompts psychological reactions, what you might call hallucinations, although it doesn't feel like something unreal when it's happening. And nor afterwards does it seem unreal. And so toward the end of our conversation, Dave said that he thought his therapist, Julie, might really enjoy talking with me. So he connected us, and she and I Zoomed. And as a result of that, I went down to Austin 3 times and did ketamine therapy myself. I think I'm going to turn it over to Dave, and he's going to talk about his experiences and to help start to give you an idea of what happens in a ketamine session from moment to moment, kind of on the outside, and then what has happened for him on the inside. So take it away, Dave.
Well, thanks for having me. Hope everybody's staying cool this week. It's toasty out there. So Thanks for the intro, and it was sort of synchronistic and fortuitous events just to connect. So it's really a pleasure to be here with you all. I'll try to do it. If I talk too fast, let me know. I'll try to do a quick spin through the background first. I had a friend who had done ketamine therapy using tablets or pills. And I had gone through a long period over a few companies of some high levels of work stress. And I would call kind of anybody who's been in a corporate environment experienced some of the worst aspects or most challenging aspects, including laying people off for several years and all the challenges in politics that can occur at a company. I was interested in looking for alternatives to just assist with the process. I have had an active sort of athletic, physical life. I've had some spiritual practices and meditation. So it was something I wanted to explore. And so I literally just looked up on, after my friend had mentioned it, ketamine therapy, and the approach that seemed the best was IV infusion, because it comes in pills and other ways to deliver the doses, but it looked like infusion was the best way to go. And to just spike a little bit on what Jan was saying about the history, I mean, this was synthesized, ketamine was first synthesized in 1962. So I researched everything before I do it. I was not about to try something that I didn't know was safe and was somewhat concerned. But it was used on battlefields in Vietnam and still is, actually, I think overseas. And I've talked to medics who deployed it because it's quick acting, and it in high anesthetic doses, it just puts you out. You're gone, and you come back. And they actually noticed people started having some healing experiences or sense of relief, and my PTSD symptoms seemed lessened. And so that's what prompted a lot of the research in the 70s. And then when the psychedelic kind of crush came down against research, everything shut down for a while. And then things opened back up in 2018, and FDA approved off-label usage. So it's legally used in hospitals as a legal anesthetic. And it's also okay for off-label usage for PTSD, untreatable depression. Addiction is great for this too, whether it's drugs or even smoking. And so anyway, so I went in with sort of the stress, little PTSD and anxiety side. So I started last fall, and I first want to have a disclaimer that every session, every experience is incredibly personal. It is very tough to describe. So words fall well short. So I'm not going to get close to describing it, but I can relay a lot. But I also hesitate a little bit in doing this because I don't want to set people's expectations, because most people probably don't have an NDE-like experience. It happened in one session and not again. I've done 7 total. And I don't know if I need to or want to do another session, but that's where I'm at right now. So I'm going to talk from some notes, and I'll elaborate, and we'll show you a few things too. So the sessions are done in just a clinic, doctor's office setting with a nice recliner chair. You wear an eye mask, blackout, the better, more the better. And Julie has a pulse oximeter on your finger, monitoring oxygen and pulse in case anything goes sideways for some reason. And so it's a very safe, comforting environment, plays some relaxing music, and this sub-anesthetic dose. So it's a very low, like 69 milligrams per kilogram of weight. And but it does still contain dissociative effects when it starts. So flow starts, and these sessions are 45 minutes. So you're there, could be there a couple hours because it takes a time, you're groggy afterwards. But these are very quick sessions. Time dilation occurs, so it feels much longer than that. But it's not like a 12-hour, I don't know, acid trip or something that people would do on the psychedelic side. With a nurse or a medic there to insert the IV, they leave the room. You're there with Julie at the time. The flow starts. and a sense of kind of pleasant well-being emerges, deep relaxation, very pleasant sensation drifting in. And I was carrying a lot of tension in my chest, and that completely disintegrated. And so I could feel my lungs and heart beat in a deeper way, almost a fluid sense of feeling my blood pulse through my veins, wild. And then the sinking sensation, and eventually it pulls, I don't know how to describe it other than kind of pulls you into a different a dissociation with your body. You know you're in the room, and it's a little transcendent where you know you're in the room, but you don't feel your body, and you kind of leave into another realm, another dimension. You know, whether it's in your head, whether you're actually leaving anywhere, I don't know. But it's got a very liquid-like experience. I liken to kind of what you might see in the Matrix or something, slow moving, very easy current, kind of creamy, moving along. And the scenes change every few minutes. And that's sort of an overview of every session. Things change and you have different kinds of experiences. It's also best to not go in with any derived sensation or sense to control the experience, or I'm going to do this because it will take you where it wants to go. And the results are much better if you do that and completely let go. So, and I'm not very good at that. I like controlling my situation. So that was hard for me. Once under full effects, dropping down deeper, and you really feel this deep sense of falling into just enormity, a massive sense of connection, warmth, peace, contentment flowing along. Massive expanses became apparent to me, right? We saw some visualizations of even jungle-like experience, some land mass. In this first session, there's a lot of greens and blues in color. There's also dark black void, and but the colors blend in quite nicely. Saw some jungle views, foliage, greens at a distance. I panned out and saw kind of a vision of the earth. I don't think I was seeing the exact earth, but it's a kind of a vision, like a dreamlike state, but very sense of connection and sameness, right? You're in this flow, feeling part of the whole. You're not attached to physical sensations in your body. My critical thinking brain checked out. And so very present, very aware, and just being held in this. Deeply, deeply humbling. A sense of my body was obliterated. I could kind of sense being in the room. Julie might touch my hand every now and then to make sure, but the brain was disengaged at a personal level. So you're still awake and aware. It's not fuzzy or intoxicating at all, but you're kind of in a different dimension or realm is the best way I can describe it. And so it reminded me of a phrase I heard of everything is okay even when it's not, that I had one of my teachers say one time, right? At some level, you're in this physical space, go through your problems of life, all the drama, pain, crises, but at some level of reality, everything is okay. So I thought I stopped breathing at a few points, and I felt like I was out for 90 minutes and I asked Julie how long it was, and she goes, it's been about 30 minutes, Dave. And it's so much longer than I would have thought. And she could adjust the dosage up and down. If I kind of was coming out, she could help send me back deep, but not too deep. I remember saying something like, words can't describe what I was experiencing. She would check in, what are you feeling? So the exit was slow and pleasant, came back, and many experiences I think can be like that. And if you've got addictions, if you've got untreatable depression, and you can have an experience of being held in oneness and realize there's more to a reality than your life, which is incredibly stressful and challenging, I think there are benefits. The experience passes. It doesn't last forever. It's like anything. So what you hope for is these sessions would have tools to help you deal with the challenges of life better. And that's been true for me. It's not a one-trick pony. Usually they say 5 to 7 sessions are what's needed because it takes a little while to get used to it. So that was the first session. I'm really not going to go into the second. It was sort of similar. There was a sense of, one time she was asking me in the second session about, what are you feeling? And I said, I'm healing. There's healing going on. I didn't know what was going on. There was something that the field was doing and pulling some energy out, or just a sense of being taken care of. And I came back feeling great. After the session, you're groggy for a good couple hours. So you have someone drive you to and from the sessions for sure. Don't want to be getting behind the wheel after that, but you're quite functional into the evening. And from what I can tell, and from 60 years, 50 years of research, there's no long-term effects at all. Again, it's still used in hospitals at much, much, much higher doses. So just taking a quick look at the question here. On a body brain reset and stuttering, I don't know. I don't think there's ever been tests on that per se, but it would be worth asking a therapist who's worked with ketamine before to see if that's something that might help. The things that are it's approved for are that depression, PTSD, addiction, etc. But I wouldn't doubt it. I actually do believe that there's some possibilities. And if anything, it doesn't work, but you tried, and it could be an incredible experience nonetheless. All right, I'll pause for a second and then get into the third session. And so let's see. So I was doing them every couple of weeks. There's one other factor, I think, when evaluating whether someone even considers doing therapy like this is having a therapist in the room. There's a Wild West right now. People will put people in a room by themselves, let them go, don't even talk to them, not have someone there to monitor the situation. So I would be very, very careful on what anybody puts themselves into. There's the therapeutic, I think, case studies have kind of started just in the last 6 years. So I think there's probably more regulation that'll need to occur, and having processes that really help deliver the therapy to its best potential. Because as we know, there's abuse of ketamine, there's pills, you can snort it on the street. There's a lot of downsides at which people can take it in directions that aren't healthy at all. And absolutely condemn that type of use. Okay, on to session 3. So I was trusting Julie in the process more, because it does take getting used to, like, what the hell is going on? And so I went into this session with a little more of my guard down and trying to figure things out or control it. So 5 to 8 minutes in, same setup, mask on, chilling out, fell back into the massive fluid-like quantum space, flowing around for a bit, scenes changing every minute or two. And I got pulled down faster, almost like a bit of a roller coaster, a little unsettling, but it wasn't bad. There was nothing that ever felt painful or traumatic. And that's not to say that can't occur. That might occur for some people. I don't know, but felt like floating in water for me, and had the sensation of being, then I had the sensation of being pulled up and backwards and over. And that was quite unsettling. And drifting and dropping then deep, deep, deep down. You almost feel like you're seeing an infinity and a deep, void and massive expanses that just go on and on and on. And so when you drop down, it's never ending. And flowing along, I just felt like you don't see a body, you're kind of floating like a field, just some sense of consciousness floating around. And things started to, I felt myself dissolving a little bit. I don't know what that meant at the time, and things were getting darker and kind of a black void. And I felt stuck and a little bit lost. Sometimes you're floating along and like, I don't know what to do. And I spoke that to Julie, and she said, just let it take you there. And so, all right, I'll then let go. And then I kind of got pulled upward and into a massive, felt like ancient, dark, void space, floating along, didn't see stars or anything. Imagery started flowing in, had some ancient visions fly through, archetypal stuff, probably Egyptians, Assyrians, I don't know, but it was really old. We're not talking a few hundred years old. it just felt like this expanse of time. You're in a unified presence of now. So all of history in one moment unfolding. And so I didn't quite know what I was seeing or experiencing. And then I was pulled up into a place where my chest tension became more present, started to get a little dark, heavy, and felt somewhat ominous, to be honest. My body or field was being stretched and elongated, and I did feel some pressure, and it felt a little uncomfortable. And it took me to the edge, and I felt like my life force was being pulled out of me. And it it was shocking, and to the core, I felt like I was dying. And I was able to blurt it out to Julie, "I'm dying." And she's sitting there monitoring my pulse, and she's like, "You're okay." And she noted afterwards that this occurred 12 minutes into the session, and I felt like I'd been floating around for a long time. So I felt this inward sense, and I have to go all the way and see this through. If this is what it takes, and I have to die right here in this room, and I completely let go, utter, complete surrender of my life. And it is hard to describe that feeling, because there's nothing in this physical world here where that can happen, but it was happening. If I was going to die, so be it. Take me. It felt like it was the right thing to do in that situation. So feeling pulled, stretched, thin, continued, life energy kind of being pulled from me, and I rose up into a deep, dark void area with a pinprick of light and a shining beam of white light appearing in the distance. And it didn't occur to me. I had read some NDE books years ago, but it's not something I'd really tracked until I researched it afterwards with Jan. And so it was a more sacred space, but not spiritual or religious in any way. This was reality. It was no different than sort of being here, but this is what I was seeing. And maybe I'll share a few screens so you can see it. So kind of a white light in the distance. These are just random images I grabbed because it was pretty far away. And but it was eerily similar to this. The light might have been a little more gold color, but the beams coming out kind of felt like this. And then I was pulled closer, light pointing at me, and I saw a cross in the middle, which I had to look up afterwards because I wasn't an expert on a footed cross. We all know what a Christian cross looks like. A footed cross has it's more square-like, and the feet of the cross are wider. Cross Patay, Templar cross, has been used actually throughout history. The Syrians had it 10,000 years ago, well before Christianity used it as well. So I saw the cross. This was a vision of there. That's a footed cross. Again, a bad image, but it was at the center of what I saw at the light. That was a surprise. I'm not expecting anything like that. See something, it was kind of, I had to look it up afterwards. I'll show you a few of these because I was like, did this come from my background? Archetypal stuff, footed cross. I mean, these have been used for 10,000 years by the Assyrians. It's been in Incas and down the Mayans, thousands and thousands of years ago. So you'll see it in different areas. I even found a version of it looking online under water somatics, where vibrational water under vibration can create a similar kind of looking cross. So to me, it felt like something that was a natural part of the universe. And it was interesting to see that and look that up afterwards. So with that being said, let me pull it back. So I felt my sense of dying. I saw kind of a being there with me. There was a knight-like presence. I joke it was like the Grail Knight from Indiana Jones in The Last Crusade, kind of like a protection figure. And an indescribable force started pulling old. I didn't get closer to the light. I didn't come up like some people do in a full near-death experience, and there was no light flashing before me, but there was old, ancient, dark energy started getting pulled out of my body to the top of my head or top of my field, whatever it was. It may have only been a minute. It felt like it lasted a long time. There was some pressure involved, but it felt so good to release. There was no sense of this being, oh my God, I'm continuing to die. It just was happening. So the energy kind of visually looked like some smoky particles getting pulled out. I also, I'll have movie references in here for you. It was like the Green Mile, when the John Coffey inmate character was breathing out kind of evil energy out of people and blowing it into the atmosphere. It's just like little particles getting pulled out, but you could see it and feel it. I started taking very deep, physical gasping breaths, deep, heavy breathing, groaning, letting air out, just getting it out. And as I was releasing the energy, I had to chuckle at the absurdity a little. I'm sitting in this chair with Julie, and I would be embarrassed by in any other environment, but there again, your critical thinking wasn't really engaged, so it didn't matter. I mean, the grandeur of what was happening, immense gratefulness for some kind of healing going on, were blockages leaving that were old, I don't know. So I sensed what felt like bits of my ancient, family lineage or energy, kind of generational material pulling out. It was just sort of a sense or a flash. I don't, you don't really know exactly what's going on. I could still sense every organ, bone, and vein in my body all at once. And in my gasping, I could sense my facial expressions, and it almost sensed my dad, or in my, mannerisms of my genetic line. You just had this sense of enormity of history being pulled out of you. In a way, it felt like a freaking exorcism, right? There's no demons, there's nobody, it was just energy getting pulled out. And my, stuck energy, I don't know. But there was a lot of WTF is going on. Like I really was not expecting anything like this. So it did feel a little supernatural and surreal. But again, it was very real and physical. And to me, it couldn't be denied as just a vision or hallucination in my brain. There was healing going on in my body, very physically, and not just some brain-based psychedelic experience. So it's wild. So the releases kept going over and over, and I was shaking, and this, energy flowing up and out of me, twitching, lurching back and forth a little bit. And Julie asked what I'm seeing, and a voice kind of spoke through me. It was like, be quiet, just hold space. I needed her at that moment to let what's going on go on, because it felt right, it felt good, and it just needed to happen. So I didn't want to talk. So I just stayed with it. And the little me critical thinking was still completely out of the way. And it felt like I was, feeling lighter, like what just wholeness feels like, very, truly free, awake and aware, and really indescribable. So the scene started to change, and so that kind of ended. And then you move on to something else. So I figured I was done. And but I felt and saw a visual of my lungs. And I have to digress here for a second, because in 2017, due to work stress, I had a blood clot that formed after I broke 2 metatarsals in my foot. And I had a pulmonary embolism form when the blood clot in my calf broke off. So I had a very challenging, traumatic hospital experience that lasted multiple days. And I could have died, but there were blood clots in your lungs. They have to heal by themselves. You can have blood thinners afterwards, but very, very painful experience. Save that for beers another time. But what I was not expecting was I got a visual. This next scene was a visual of my lungs turned from black to a vivid greenish color, almost kind of a neon green. And something said, "You have new lungs." And I don't think that was literally new lungs, but I was pulled rapidly into a blue-green space, almost like a large gymnasium room, square-like tile walls. And that was sort of a metaphor for my lungs. And I started breathing and gulping and deep breathing, fresh air, full expansion, completely astonished. And I was like, there's more? This is ridiculous. I thought I already got a healing, and this is something I thought I was healed from the DVT, and my lungs were fine. I thought they'd healed. So it was sort of a second gift, incredibly grateful. And I took deeper breaths than I felt I had taken in my life. Like every square inch of my lungs filling up in this cube-like space that I was in that sort of represented my lungs. Clean air pulling in and out through my mouth and nose. And it felt a little like scuba diving. I was a scuba diver. And so it felt like compressed air almost. I'm breathing normal air in the office, but just in that space I was in, it felt like a little bit of compressed air, a little bit artificial tasting almost. It was wild. So with each breath to the limit, felt my body was getting clean, fresh air in, feeling good, cleansing, amazing in this matrix-like quantum space. And then more shaking and trembling occurred. She called it neurogenic tremors. If you've seen, had to look that one up too. If you've seen zebras or animals in the wild after being chased in fear, they'll shake. And that shaking kind of occurs, and it's releasing of tension and stress. It's involuntary. I was not in control of this, and I was just vibrating and twitching. I felt like I was spitting and gasping and breathing out so deeply and lurching forward. And she said I wasn't, but it sure felt like I was. And but she could obviously see I was going through something. So, and then I had a visual of clear little bubbles kind of start flowing out of my hands and feet. And this was towards the end of the session. And as a scuba diver too, you'll see bubbles and things, and they're little tiny bubbles. If anybody knows what it's like when you get the bends, and this is nothing like that, but you know, bubbles start released from your blood vessels actually, and you can die of it. But this was just a visualization of bubbles kind of pulling out of my body. But I actually had pressure in my hands and feet, and they felt bloated. And so I actually felt this pressure of this stuff releasing, and it almost felt like it got stuck in my hands and feet at one point. And I was like, ooh, this is starting to feel pressure. And then eventually all just kind of cleaned out and exited. Very, very trippy. So to wrap up that session, I started to come back to normal consciousness, and you kind of flow back into the room, and you'll just feel it's great. It was graceful coming back. And she touched my hand a little bit, and I told her to squeeze harder because it felt good at the time, just when when I felt the releasing leaving my body. I was still kind of groaning deeply, letting stuff out, some guttural exhales. And then I was laughing too, because I couldn't believe what was going on. And it was just something beyond my comprehension. And I managed to blurt out to Julie, you've got some explaining to do, because I was imagining that I would be dead in the chair, and my wife would have to come pick me up in the room. But so and even she will admit, like, every session's different. So sometimes nothing happens, sometimes things happen. Even experiences like these can, maybe it's 10 to 20% of the time. So that's the one thing I'm hesitant in telling the story, is that I just don't want people's expectations to be set for any type of experience. You just have to go and see what happens. And you might not need anything like I just had. It could be just a great experience of oneness, and that's all. So deep gratefulness for the whole process. I've did a few more sessions since then, had some minor healings that occurred, nothing as dramatic as that. And let me see, was there anything else I wanted to relay? I think I'll save some of that to the end. But so that was the NDE light experience, is probably the way I describe it. And maybe Jan, I can pass it back over to you and have a chat. But before you go, after these sessions, I was like, what the heck just happened to me? I started diving into NDE research again, found Bruce Greyson's book, and was comparing, and I was like, oh my God, this is very similar. And knowing that IANDS and others are doing, research with people waiting, you have to wait for people dying on the operating table or in accidents and talk to them afterwards. And I thought there might be a case that there would be a small percentage of people who've done ketamine therapy who might have had these experiences and can share. And so they're different, but similar.